The idea came to us over a few drinks at a downtown bar. Eric was the one who brought it up. He had been reading about the history of St. Louis, particularly about the infamous LEMP family. Everyone in the city knew about the LEMP mansion, its tragic past, the suicides, the rumors of hauntings. Eric, though, always had a thing for the paranormal, and he couldn't resist the idea of doing something different for Halloween. "How about we do a murder mystery party at the LEMP mansion?" he said, half joking, but with that glint in his eye that meant he was already serious. I remember looking around the table. Jess, my girlfriend, looked intrigued but skeptical. Matt and Chloe, always up for something new, laughed, thinking it was just another one of Eric's crazy ideas. Laura, on the other hand, went quiet, her eyes narrowing as if she could already sense the darkness tied to the place. "Are you sure that's a good idea?" she asked. "I mean, people say the place is cursed." "It's just a story." "Laura," Eric shot back, a grin spreading across his face. "You know me, I love this stuff. Besides, the LEMP mansion does these events all the time. It's all in good fun." The more we talked about it, the more it seemed like the perfect plan for Halloween. Something spooky, something with an edge. And besides, it wasn't like we believed in ghosts. We were just a group of friends looking for a memorable night. We booked the mansion for the night of October 31st. The mansion's staff set everything up for us. A private rental with a catered dinner, and the rooms arranged to fit the theme of our murder mystery game. The house, with its historic creaky floors and dimly lit hallways, was the perfect setting for our story. I didn't know much about the LEMP family history beyond the basics. William LEMP Sr. had built a beer empire in the late 1800s, but tragedy after tragedy struck the family. His son, Frederick, died young, which led to William Sr.'s suicide in 1904. William Jr. took over the family business, but was said to have spiraled into madness. He shot himself in the house, too. Several other members of the family followed suit, suicides in the same mansion, all leaving a dark stain on the place. By the time the night rolled around, we were ready. Eric had gone all out with the murder mystery game. Each of us had been given a character, complete with a backstory and potential motives for the murder we were supposed to solve. The plan was simple: dinner, some drinks, and then the game would begin. Someone would be killed, and it was my job, as the detective, to figure out who among us was the culprit. Classic whodunit fun, with the added bonus of a spooky setting. The LEMP mansion was just as eerie as you'd expect from a house that old. The air inside felt thick, heavy, like it was pressing down on us the moment we walked through the door. The staff was friendly enough, but there was something about the way they moved, how they quickly left after setting things up. That felt off. It was as if they didn't want to linger in the house any longer than necessary. After dinner, we gathered in the main parlor. It was a grand room with tall windows and heavy velvet curtains that seemed to soak up the light. The wood paneling on the walls was dark and polished, the kind of place that felt frozen in time. "That portrait's creepy," Jess said, pointing to a painting hanging above the fireplace. It was a portrait of William LEMP Jr., known as Billy. His expression was stern, eyes dark and hollow. It felt like he was watching us. "Perfect atmosphere, huh?" Eric said, raising his glass. "Let the games begin." We laughed, feeling the energy in the room pick up. The game started smoothly. Everyone was in character, accusing one another, trying to figure out who the killer was. It felt like any other themed party, until Chloe screamed. At first, we all thought it was part of the act. Chloe was playing the victim, after all. But the scream didn't stop. We rushed over to her, finding her standing by the doorway to the dining room, her face drained of color. "What happened?" Matt asked, his voice sharp with concern. Chloe pointed toward the hallway. I saw someone. There was a man. He was just standing there. "Is this part of the game?" Jess asked, glancing at Eric. Eric frowned. No one's supposed to be here but us." We looked at each other, a nervous energy crackling in the air. I walked to the hallway where Chloe had pointed, expecting to find one of the staff messing with us. But the hall was empty. Silent, except for the faint creaks of the house settling. "Probably just your imagination," I said, trying to lighten the mood. But even I didn't believe it. The mansion suddenly felt colder. The game continued, but the energy was off. Chloe was quiet, her eyes darting around the room like she was expecting something, or someone, to appear again. Laura kept fidgeting with her drink, and Jess looked uneasy, though she didn't say much. The lights flickered. It was brief, just a momentary dip, but long enough to make everyone freeze. "Old house," Eric said, forcing a smile. "Electrical issues, probably." Then, the lights went out completely. It was pitch black. We stumbled for our phones, turning on flashlights, but when the lights came back on, Matt was gone. "What the hell?" I muttered, my heart pounding. "Where's Matt?" We called his name, but there was no response. We spread out, checking room after room, but there was no sign of him. The mansion wasn't that big. He couldn't have just disappeared. "I don't like this," Jess said, her voice shaking. "This isn't funny. It's not part of the game," Eric said, his face pale. "He shouldn't have disappeared." We gathered back in the parlor, tension growing by the second. Something was wrong. There was no reason for Matt to have just vanished like that. As we sat there, trying to figure out what to do next, the temperature in the room dropped. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed from upstairs, followed by the unmistakable sound of something, or someone, walking. None of us wanted to go upstairs, but I knew we had to. I grabbed a flashlight, leading the way up the narrow staircase, my heart thudding in my chest. As we reached the top of the stairs, we saw it. The door to one of the bedrooms was slightly ajar. Light from the hallway filtered in, casting shadows on the floor. Slowly, we approached, and I pushed the door open wider. Matt was standing in the middle of the room, staring at the wall. His back was to us, his shoulders stiff and rigid. "Matt?" I called out, stepping closer. He didn't move. Jess rushed forward, grabbing his arm, but he didn't respond. It was like he was in a trance, completely unaware of us. His eyes were locked on the far wall, where the portrait of William LEMP Jr. hung. The same cold, dead eyes stared down at us from the painting. But something was different. The expression had changed. The smile was wrong. "Matt!" Jess shook him, panic rising in her voice. Finally, he blinked, his head jerking as if he had just woken up. What happened? You were just standing there, Laura said, her voice trembling. What the hell were you doing? Matt looked confused. I don't know. I don't remember. That was enough for me. We're leaving. Now. But when we tried the front door, it wouldn't open. Eric yanked at it, pulled with all his strength, but it wouldn't budge. We tried the side doors, the windows, everything was locked tight. What is going on? Jess whispered, tears in her eyes. I don't know, I said, feeling the panic set in. But we need to stay together. We retreated to the parlor, everyone on edge. The atmosphere had shifted. It was no longer just a game. It was something far darker. The house felt alive. It was watching us, waiting for us to make a move. That's when Eric spoke up, his voice low. There's something I didn't mention earlier. Something about William LEMP Jr. What are you talking about? I asked, already feeling my stomach twist. He wasn't just some business guy who lost it and killed himself, Eric said, avoiding our eyes. There were rumors that he'd gone mad because he was seeing things no one else could see. His mind just snapped. What the hell, Eric? Laura said, glaring at him. You didn't think that was important to mention before we came here? I didn't think it was real, Eric snapped back. I thought it was just part of the legend, you know? Ghost stories to make the mansion more interesting. But it wasn't just a story. The lights flickered again, and this time, the shadows in the room seemed to shift. They weren't just cast by the furniture or the curtains. They moved, slowly, deliberately, like figures creeping along the walls. And then I saw him. The man from the portrait, William LEMP Jr., standing in the doorway, his face pale and sunken, his eyes empty hollows. He stared at us, not with malice, but with an overwhelming sadness that chilled me to the bone. He didn't speak, but I heard his voice in my mind, cold and distant. You shouldn't have come here. The figure moved toward us, and as it did, the temperature dropped even further. My breath came out in foggy puffs, and Jess gripped my arm, her nails digging into my skin. We need to get out of here, I said, my voice barely a whisper. But the house wasn't going to let us go. Not without a fight. The door slammed shut, and the windows rattled as if something outside was pounding to get in, or out. The shadows grew darker, surrounding us, and I knew, deep down, that we weren't alone. William LEMP Jr.'s ghost wasn't the only one haunting this place. There were others, family members who had met their end in the same way. The mansion had claimed them, and now it wanted us, too. We ran, not knowing where we were going, just trying to find a way out. The house seemed to twist and shift around us, doors leading to nowhere, hallways stretching on forever. It was like the mansion had swallowed us whole, trapping us in its endless maze. Finally, we found ourselves back in the dining room, breathless and terrified. The door to the basement was open. Eric shook his head. No way. I'm not going down there. But we didn't have a choice. With no other option, we descended into the basement, the stairs creaking under our weight. The air was damp and cold, and the smell of decay hung in the air. At the far end of the basement was a door, rusted and ancient, with chains hanging loosely from it. Eric stopped, his face pale, This is where they found him. William Jr. He spent his last days down here before he... I didn't let him finish. We needed to get out. We pushed the door open, revealing a narrow tunnel, the walls lined with old brick. It was dark, but at the end of the tunnel, I could see a faint light. An exit. We ran. I don't remember much after that. Just the feeling of the cold air hitting my face as we burst out into the night. The mansion loomed behind us, silent and still, but I could feel its gaze on us, watching, waiting. We never talked about that night again. None of us ever went back to the LEMP mansion, but I still dream about it, about William LEMP Jr. and the sadness in his eyes, about the whispers that haunt the halls. The LEMP mansion isn't just a house, it's a prison, and once you step inside, it never lets you leave, not completely. It's waiting.